him. You lugubrious leech. You doppelganger of deceit and deviance. You lethal liar. You dim-witted dictator. You foolish fascist. She ain't worked for you. She worked above you. She worked beyond you. Get your preposition right. Then he got the nerve to say he gonna grab it. That ain't what Aretha Franklin said. I'ma give you something you can feel. Like the brothers in the street say, tap lightly, like a woodpecker with a headache.
And there was an inherent political meaning in this funeral. And it was a fundamental rebuke to the vileness, the corruption, the self-centeredness, the selfishness, the cruelty that we see emanate from the Oval Office in the form of President Donald J. Trump every day. And what the country has is a choice. And sometimes when we talk about politics in moments like this, we think that the discussion of politics as itself is somehow not appropriate to the moment. Mm-hmm. This was a man in the arena. This was a man in the fight. He believed things, and he gave great sacrifice in service of those things that he believed. And the choice that the country faces in a couple of months about whether to repudiate Trumpism or to validate it is an essential one. Yeah. And you saw today the argument being made for its repudiation from George W. Bush, from Barack Obama, and from Meghan McCain. The things that John McCain believed in are worth defending, are worth debating, and are worth fighting for.
Yeah, you know, and Chris, I feel like the presidency itself in the United States has gone through all of these different archetypal forms, and one of the most classic was the heroic archetype, right? You had Eisenhower, you had Teddy Roosevelt, who John McCain so admired, that Americans looked to that type of man to be president. They've all been men, so they looked to that type of man to be president of the United States. There's been the orator archetype, somebody inspiring, the Barack Obama type. You've had the person that is more relatable, the Bill Clinton. We now are in this sort of era where I feel we're almost unmoored. There is no archetype that describes what we have now. John McCain, it does feel like, you know, that hero archetype really has kind of gone away. And it really does. I don't know if you feel that way, if you feel unmoored in a way this morning.
Well, we were pretty well moored in the beginning because George Washington walked away from it after 2 terms. He walked away after being commander-in-chief, and to the point where George III, when he heard he was going to leave and go back to his farm, he said he'll be the greatest man in the world. We had a very good foundation. You know what I thought watching today and covering this for 2 hours? I thought of perhaps the black church, which you know so well, the churches which have operated underground, like in Eastern Europe, and I went to one in Eastern Europe, East Germany, before the wall came down. And it's a religious service that has a political message as well, a statement, and a statement of resistance, of defiance. And except for when Meghan McCain just burst out with it and said what she felt about the whole day and the whole thing going on now in our country politically, that the rest of it was a submerged defiance in a religious form of a political statement. Every moment of today was a statement by John McCain. He wanted us to know what he thought about our republic right now. And I do feel, I think you said this a moment ago, that he is a bit anachronistic, and that's our tragedy, that someone like him, who is unpredictable, mischievous in many ways, is able to say what he wants to say when he wants to say it in a profile of courage. He's not artificial intelligence like so many politicians are today, predictably coded for certain responses emotionally, and even what they say to us on television, Joy. I sometimes think that they're programmed without any spontaneity. Well, I dealt with John McCain, not like Steve, because he was his ally. I was on the other side oftentimes in arguments. And I felt a human being up against me with all kinds of attitude of real human life behind him. It was real, and he was real. And I think today was sort of a reminder of what we've been in the past and that greatest generation that Tom Brokaw wrote about. Not so much recently. It's hard to find another John McCain in the Senate, for example, right now, man or woman, Democrat or Republican, progressive or right-winger. I don't see a lot of evidence of profiles and courage right now, all around. Your thoughts?
And
so much of our politics, our public life, our public discourse can seem small and mean and petty. Trafficking in bombast and insult and phony controversies and manufactured outrage. It's a politics that pretends to be brave and tough, but in fact is born of fear.
If we're ever tempted to forget who we are, to grow weary of our cause, John's voice will always come as a whisper over our shoulder. We are better than this. America is better than this.
The America of John McCain has no need to be made great again because America was always great.
To Bishop Ellis and Reverend Smith, to President Clinton and her husband Bill, to Attorney General, soon to be President Holder, and to Reverend Jackson and Minister Farrakhan. If some cosmic ethnographer were to drop down here and do a biopsy, an extract of living tissue of black genius, here today would be the veritable cornucopia of its radical expression. We done had all kind of singing up in here, from high European-derived classical composition to the gut bucket gospel grueling reality of our blues and soul traditions. We have heard singers hit high notes and pan the depths of the diapason stop of the range and scale of American music. But we are here for one voice, one reason, one woman who was a freakishly precocious woman, a bronze wunderkind of the gospel. Born in the legendary rhetorical room she gestated in of her father, Clarence LaVon Franklin. She took me one day to the Triumph Awards, and there she had me attempt to explain his genius. C.L. Franklin practiced the species of black sacred speech called whooping. How does one explain whooping? The coarsened articulation, the striated diction, the elastic grammar, speech pressured by music that turns into song. You will quickly see one of the greatest exemplars of that rhetorical form in the presence of the Reverend Dr. Jasper Williams. But it was in that womb that she was born, and in that Mississippi mud arrived Detroit deity. Aretha Franklin at 14 sang "Never Grow Old." And in singing it, you could feel the theological prescience and the clairvoyance that God gave to her. She became a vehicle of the on-high purpose that was radiated in that beautiful brown body. And when Aretha sang at 14, she convinced people that indeed she would never grow old. But then she recorded the song again when she was 30 years old. And in recording that song on her epic Amazing Grace, where she gave us a vision of a return to the gospel world that her father claimed she had never left anyhow. And then when she sang that song about 5 minutes and 21 seconds in, on a 9-minute and 57-second song, you felt the volcanic eruption, the glissando, the melisma, stretching a single note across several syllables so that she could articulate the deep and profound realities that only song could capture. Aretha sang that song at 30 in a different way she sang it at 14. Why is that? Between 14 and 30, there was a whole bunch of living. She never loved a man the way she loved that man. She said, if you're going to be a man demanding a do-right woman, you better be a do-right man. Now, we know the great scholar Farrah Jasmine Griffin speaks about the inchoate feminist perspective, never calling her feminist because Aretha Franklin never called herself a feminist, but she had feminist sensibilities. The independent, autonomous reach of black female identity was regnant in her rhetoric. She was black girl magic before there was black girl magic. And so between 14 and 30, there was a lot of living. There was a chain of foods that she was conscribed into. There was the reality of the hurt and pain, the ardor, the ecstasy, the suffering, and the reality that we had to confront as a black people. And don't get it twisted, she was black without apology or excuse. And she was American without argument or exception. She was black because she was from the blackest city in the world, Detroit. I know y'all jealous. You from Chicago, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. You good, but you ain't got the D. Dardanetta Shrimp Shack, Fago Red Pop, Verner's Ginger Ale, Coney Island Hot Dog. The future hitched a ride in a Cadillac and found its destiny in a Ford. We had Motown music. I know everybody else had music, but y'all ain't had it like Detroit had it. The greatest artist ever produced, Mr. Stevie Wonder. The greatest songwriter ever, Smokey Robinson. And for a long while, the greatest entertainer, Mr. Michael Jackson. And the greatest singer in the world, Aretha Franklin. She was an edifying thief. She took other people's songs and made them her own. When Otis Redding heard her sing, he said, "She done took my song." Oh, yes, she did, and he was glad she took it, because she spelled out in a way he never spelled out respect. She had to articulate it and enunciate it so folk could understand what she was talking about. Then in that belly of blackness in Detroit, without apology or excuse, that embrace of her blackness led her to be political. We got all kind of music now that ain't got nothing to do with nothing except cars and money and glory. I ain't mad at that, but she was about getting Angela Davis out of jail. She was about working with Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. She was about transforming the existence of black America. Now Negroes scared to say they black, scared to show up at a two-black place. That's why some black folk ain't here today. They sending letters. They don't want to get up in this blackness. They don't want to feel the nasty power of this blackness. We are black in Detroit. We don't care. Take your shoes off. Dip it in the water. Get baptized. And then this orange apparition had the nerve to say she worked for him. You lugubrious leech. You doppelganger of deceit and deviance. You lethal liar. You dim-witted dictator. You foolish fascist. She ain't worked for you. She worked above you. She worked beyond you. Get your preposition right. Then he got the nerve to say he gonna grab it. That ain't what Aretha Franklin said. I'm gonna give you something you can feel. Like the brothers in the street say, tap lightly, like a woodpecker with a headache. And so, don't you sully the memory of our great queen. Aretha Franklin was an original. Never one like her before, never another like her afterward. She was bold and brilliant and courageous and beautiful and indebted to the traditions that spark our renewal. She refused to sell out. She remained herself all along in her life. And so as I take my seat, you got to remember, Aretha Franklin gave us something deep and powerful. When she made her transition, Farrah Jasmine Griffin, the professor at Columbia, said she was doing work even after she died. When she made her transition, convictions came down. Immunity pleas were made. Folk got sent to jail. Even as an ancestor, she doing work. She moved from being the queen of soul to the queen of souls. She is indeed looking over us as our ancestor, never forgetting that she will walk with us. I had to go the other day from South Bend, Indiana, into Chicago, leaving Notre Dame, going to Chicago to speak. My ticket said the plane left at 4:33, but it arrived at 4:20. I had landed before I took off. If you ain't already at where you going, you ain't gonna be there when you arrive. You got to already know where you heading. Aretha Franklin ain't just made no transition. She been building up her housing equity in another place with another God who loved her soul. She was already there. She said a prayer for us. She loved us, and now she is the queen of our souls. Long live the queen. Long live the queen.
The one and only Reverend Professor Eric Michael Dyson. Michael Eric Dyson. At this time, we will have